Hello, hello. All right, in this short video, we are going to go over dialogue and why you should consider adding dialogue when writing or revising your next kind of narrative. So, first question we always ask is, why do we want to include dialogue in a story? Right? We've got all the things of my Bitmoji doing all kinds of things, has tons what have to do with like dialogue or speaking, right? So, things to consider with dialogue is that's how people interact. If we say dialogue could also include like sign language or nonverbal communication as well in this, right? But humans need some kind of interaction to communicate, to build things as your story is progressing, right? The other thing is that we have previously talked about in another video is that characterization is dialogue, and the way someone speaks could tell us a little bit about the character or how we're supposed to take the character. If they blabble on and on and on, that tells us they're very talkative. If someone is very stern and says, we need to talk, right, in a certain tone, that tells us something different. Or, hey, you talking to me, bro? What you want, right? That has an accent, a different way of speaking, tells us something about the character. The other important thing with dialogue is author's choice to emphasize something important in the plot. So if you have an important plot point and you want to emphasize that, you want to highlight it for a reader, you can use dialogue to make sure they notice that. So does your character change their perspective because of talking to somebody, right? Or does your character experience something or want to reflect at any point on their story? Maybe that's a conversation with a trusted individual that they talk through it, right? So dialogue can be used, right? Just for interactions, for telling us about characters, and in order to emphasize, to highlight something important happening in the plot of our story. All right, so first thing we've got to go over, and this is color-coded, I'm sorry for my colorblind folks, but it tells you just the basic formatting when it comes to dialogue. So this is something definitely in a revision, if you did include dialogue, making sure you're following these rules, where every time somebody new speaks, it should be indented. Those are those arrows pointing in blue there, right? So every time it should be its own paragraph. That's why when you read a book, when you see dialogue, it tends to take up a lot of space, but it allows us to kind of see it like a back and forth text message in a way, right? As always, use quotation marks around what is said. Those are those little lines, right? Capitalize the first thing in the quote, even if it's not the beginning of the sentence, right? We have Sally said, but the quote itself starts with something. Punctuation goes inside the quotation marks. So you can see here there's a comma or a period. It goes inside the quotation marks, not outside. And you always want to remember those ending quotation marks at the end of a sentence, if that's where the quote is. That's a big one. I also tend to forget a parentheses, those little scoop things at the end, so making sure that it's at the end when you revise. Now, this is basic formatting. You can pause, screen capture this if that's helpful for you. But the biggest thing to remember is what we call a dialogue tag, right? A dialogue tag is this little bit here of said a person, right? It's just a little tag, a little phrase that says, hey, this is who was speaking, and could give us maybe a little bit of information about how the person is speaking, right? So we could say said while moving their hands, said in a rushed way, and that's a good way to show some characterization in our dialogue as well. All right, this is a good way to say a different way. Instead of just saying da 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 da, said Sally, we can split some information. So if we want to make it a point that she has a not happy tone, we could add that after the first sentence and then have her continue on speaking. And that just means this formatting here, where you put the tag in the middle of the sentence, is a different way to format dialogue there, if that is helpful for you. But you can see in all of our dialogue, we want to make sure we have that tagline, either at the beginning, in the middle, or at the end of our dialogue that says who said it with that dialogue tag, right? Or a speaker tag, it's sometimes called. And you can add information to this of saying Sally said in a rushed state, Alan agreed while putting on his hat, right? Describe those characters in that. So something to consider when you are looking at revising or writing your narrative, of places to put dialogue to, again, add some information about characters, as well as emphasize parts in the plot, and just to make your story look a little more interesting.